We are here with none other than Frank Zane. We're in his private training studio, and we're just gonna rattle off some questions. So tell me a little bit about the mind-muscle connection. I feel like this is a popular topic. Everyone's always trying to work synergistically between the muscle and the mind and how to activate a certain muscle. What's your take?
I think that the mind-muscle connection is already made. You know, basically, it's a simple thing. Now we have a sort of a word or words that describe something that we've been doing all along. If you do your exercise successfully, you're focused on the movement, and at first you have to sort of make that connection. You have to, just like learning to drive a standard transmission, you have to learn how to do it, coordinate the clutch and shifting and all that. But, you know, after you know how to do that, it's automatic, and that's like, it's already made, and it's like that with working out. The first time you do an exercise, you have to pay attention to every little thing to do it right and to feel it in the muscle. But after a while, it comes automatic. You just go right into it with the machine, with the device you're using. You do your reps, and you feel the effect. You can feel what's happening. I pay attention to the sensation when I'm doing an exercise against the background of counting reps. And I make it so that I do all the reps that I do, usually around 10 or 12 on each exercise. After I do the exercise, I can feel the pump coming on, and then I stretch, and that makes it feel even better. Yeah. So, you know, it's something that happens on its own, and basically if you focus on what you're doing, but it does start with focus, is paying attention to what you're doing.
I think now, what I notice is with my fans when they ask me questions, I'm sure you get it too, everyone overthinks. You know, they're looking for the perfect training program, the perfect retracting the shoulder blades, or, you know, perfect foot position. Like, is there even a perfect? There is no perfect blueprint, you know, to give anyone. It just comes through repetition. Like, what's your take on that when everyone's over-analyzing? There's too much information out there.
It's sort of like they're coming from textbook to gym. Yeah. It's more about discovering what gives you a pump. I mean, you just got to focus on doing so you get the pump, the blood engorging an area and where you intended it to be. And if you did, you've done it right. But if you're always thinking, I got an email about, what about when I'm doing incline presses? You know, should I tense my scapula or should I? No, just do the exercise. Yeah. You know, follow the form of the exercise, and everything will work out the way it needs.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I don't know, I just feel like too much information equals bad. But when you're just in the gym enjoying yourself, feeling the pump, the thrill, the exhilaration, the exercise, that's where the groove and all the magic happens. Yeah. I mean, we spoke about it yesterday, the state of bodybuilding, you know, how different bodybuilding is today compared to your era. Like, we talked about how you guys would go to the beach between sessions. You'd be in a gym for 3 hours a day and then go back for an hour or two later, you know, and I don't see that anyone does that anymore. And I think that's a big difference in the physiques, the muscle bellies and the overall look. And many people would say it was better back then. What do you think is a factor that contributes to that?
I think for one thing, there are fewer people doing it then, and so we were more selective. You know, like everybody wanted to come to California and train that Gold's Gym in the early 1970s, and it was great, the people we had. They were all, you know, at a pretty high level, and the atmosphere was wonderful. Yeah. And then as bodybuilding grew and got more popular, you got more and more people coming that were just sort of wannabes, and, you know, it basically filled up the space that we had all to ourselves before that. And yeah, we'd go to the gym, and we would maybe train for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then get lunch, and then go to the beach, and then come back and go again in the late afternoon. And that was, I spent my summers doing that.
Now, how many times were you eating a day? Like, let's say when you and Arnold were training together, like, were you guys eating every 2.5, 3 hours? Or what was your take on food back then?
I found myself doing certain things, and one of them was not eating that much. In other words, I didn't do this deliberately, but I noticed what was happening is as I got in better shape, I was tending to stretching out the space between meals and not really eating until I'm hungry. So my motto became stay hungry longer, because when you're hungry, you're actually in the fat burning mode. You know, first your glucose goes, you work that, you know, you oxidize that, then your glycogen stored in your muscles and liver, that gets burned up. And then you get into burning body fat, and that's good for a good 8 hours. And not until that point is when you start burning muscle after about not eating for 8 to 10 hours even. And so you don't have to worry, just by eating every 2 hours, you don't have to worry about, losing muscle mass. It's not gonna happen, you're gonna lose fat. But you may get smaller, you might, not have as much energy, but still, if you go by your appearance, and that's what I always focused on, is don't go by these things that aren't the real thing. What the real thing is what you look like. And so I took a lot of photos, lots of photos, and I judged what I looked like and what I still had to do on what I was looking at in the photos. I saw weak areas, I saw good points. Some of the shots were really, really good, but the ones that were the most informative were the ones that aren't so good, But I wanted to learn to see what I look like to other people. I think that's the thing. And I always advocated people take photos of themselves.
That's one of the biggest contrasts I see is the workout intensity and duration was longer. The meal frequency was shorter. It wasn't, for you, it wasn't a lot of food. What about guys like Arnold? Were they eating excessive amounts of food? Were they binge eating? Were they eating every 2 hours, 3 hours? Or what were they doing?
I think about this episode, it was like early 70s, it might have even been 1969 or 1970. We were at Denny's having breakfast and he said, "Frank, I'll tell you the secret of nutrition." I said, "All right, let's hear it." He says, "It doesn't matter what you eat, just so you eat a lot of it." And I think, whoa, that doesn't work for me. I watched my carbohydrate intake is what I did all those years. I would basically get 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, a half a gram of carbs. So it'd be like if I weighed 200 grams of protein every day, 100 grams of carbs, enough, mainly before my workout, so I'd have enough energy to get a pump. And then my fat intake was moderately, pretty low. But I got in good shape doing it. I still sort of do that. I always eat more protein than carbs. And good fats, not so much saturated fats, mostly things like olive oil, monounsaturated oils, almond oil, But I'm not really big on using no butter, no cream.
So what was your typical breakfast? Let's say morning of the Olympia. What did you eat?
And so I had to be at the auditorium at noon for prejudging, okay? So up at 6, and I'd have a breakfast. I'd have maybe 3 soft-boiled eggs or poached eggs with about 8 ounces of calf's liver and baked yam.
Calf's liver?
Calf's liver and baked yam. And that stayed with me for a while. And then after I let that digest, and then about every 45 minutes I would have about a bunch of amino acids with a slice of baked yam. And I'd do that every 45 minutes right up to the show. Wow. Right up to the show, and I'd go over there. And the other thing was too, is I wanted to make sure that I was stimulus hungry for weights, because I didn't train. If the show was Saturday, the last workout I got might have been Tuesday. I was posing a lot, because it's about posing. It was posing. But really, I wasn't working out that much with the weights. But then when I pumped up immediately when I went backstage, immediately. And I never did a lot of pumping up backstage. I remember guys like, I remember Sergio Oliva when he was competing. He worked out, he got like 2 hours workout backstage. And he'd go out all blow it up, and then as he stood there, just deflate. And I never did that. I just did a little bit and then walk out and pump up when you're posing.
One of the key takeaways that I learned when I first met you, I remember you told me one piece of advice. You said, don't get big too fast. So you said, don't get big too fast. And I think what you meant by then was, don't lift heavy, don't get injured, because once you get injured, you could get re-injured again. That's gonna hinder your performance. So don't lift too heavy, and also don't get too heavy, because the midsection actually gets heavier. And this question that many people ask me, how do you keep a tight waist? Like, what do you have to say about people that are more concerned with, hey, how do I get my waist smaller? Is there anything they could do?
Well, I think don't eat a lot of food at once. Don't stretch your gut out, and don't eat a lot, and then do a lot of ab work. Now, you've done remarkably well, even at this heavier body weight. You're at like 225. You still have a tiny waist. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. You're holding a lot of your weight in your thighs right now, I think. Yeah. But basically, that's the thing: is take your time. Learn to see what you look like to other people by getting photos taken, so you can see yourself from all angles, and take your time and do a good job. Yeah. It's hard though, it's hard for somebody, younger guys especially, they want results fast. Older, more mature people are more intent about going about it more gradually and making progress slowly. But in both cases, you need feedback of your progress. Yeah. And photos are the best way to get that.
but also I think that getting big too fast is actually gonna hurt the physique. Like we've both talked about it, the best we've looked is at the lower weight, not necessarily the higher weight. Actually, the higher we got in weight, on stage weight and muscle, you know, it kind of just throws off the line. So I think it is, like we talked about, it's important just to, you know, make steady, slow improvements rather than go jump 10, 15 pounds in muscle, you know, in 5 months time or something, you know, because we tend to be asking a lot of questions, and sometimes we get asked questions to the wrong people and they have the wrong advice for us. You know, hey, you know, how do I do better? Oh, well, you gotta get bigger. Hey, how do I go better? You know, well, you gotta lift heavier, put on more muscle. And that could lead to injury or ruining your lines and your flow. And you're right, it is a race.
The main thing is that when you're working out, the main thing is focus. Means to concentrate on one thing at a time only. And I was always very strict when I got to the gym like that. I would purposely go at a time when there weren't many people there so I could really concentrate on what I was doing. And I noticed that when I concentrated like that, I could do, I guess some people would call it amazing, but I remember one time, and I was curious. I did Roman chair sit-ups one time for a half an hour. I was like, well, I think I could do a half an hour, and I did, and I guess it wasn't too bad. So the next day, I did it for an hour. My lower back was a little sore from that, but the next day wasn't too bad, so I did it for an hour and a half. And eventually then I did 2 hours the next day, and then 2.5 hours Roman chair sit-up. You know, what it is your mind. I put my attention on the four corners of the room. It was one of the devices I had, and I was in the four corners of the room imagining myself doing sit-ups there. In other words, it was sort of not in my body doing it. And you know, I realized that I could do whatever I set my mind to.